The Discourses of Christ of the Last Days.
Words on Knowing God's Work and Disposition. Excerpt. Whether God does His work through His incarnation or His Spirit, it is all done according to His management plan. It is not done according to any overt or hidden methods, or according to human needs, but completely according to His management plan. It is not as if the work of the last days can be done any way that God pleases. This stage is done on the foundation of the previous two stages of His work. The work of the Age of Grace, the second stage of His work, enabled mankind to be redeemed, and this was done by the Incarnation. It is not impossible for the Spirit to perform the current stage of God's work. He is capable of doing it, but it is more appropriate for the Incarnation to do it. This can save people more effectively. After all, the utterances of the Incarnation are better than the direct utterances of the Holy Spirit at conquering people, and they are better at facilitating people's knowledge of God. When the Spirit works, He can't always be with people. It's not possible for the Spirit to directly live and speak with people face to face, like the Incarnation does now. And there are times when it's not possible for the Spirit to reveal what's inside people like the Incarnation can. In this stage, the Incarnation's work is mainly to conquer people, and after conquering them, to make them perfect, so that they will come to know God and be able to worship Him. This is the work of ending the era. If this stage were not about conquering people, but only about letting them know that there is indeed a God, then the Spirit could perform it. You may think that if this stage were done by the Spirit, He could replace the flesh and do the same work as the flesh, and that because God is almighty, no matter if it were the flesh or the Spirit working, the same results could be achieved. However, you would be wrong. God works according to His management and to His plan and steps to save man. It is not like, as you imagine, that the Spirit is almighty, the flesh is almighty, and God Himself is almighty, so He can do whatever He wants to do. God works according to His management plan, and each stage of His work has certain steps within it. How this stage should be done, and the details that should be involved are also planned out. The first stage of God's work was done in Israel, and this last stage is in the country of the Great Red Dragon, China. Some people say, "Can't God do it in another country?" According to this stage's management plan, it must be done in China. The people of China are backward. Their lives are decadent, and there are no human rights or freedoms. It is a country where Satan and evil demons are in power. The purpose of appearing and working in China is to save the people who are living in the darkest part of the world and who have been most deeply corrupted by Satan. This is the only way to really defeat Satan and completely obtain glory. If God were to appear and work in another country, it would not be as significant. Every stage of God's work is necessary and performed by God in the way that it must be done. Some things can be achieved by the work of the flesh, and some things can be achieved by the work of the Spirit. God chooses to work through the flesh or the spirit according to whichever method will get the best results. It's not like, as you have suggested, that any way of working would be fine, that God could do the work by casually taking on human form, and that the Spirit could also do it without meeting any people face to face, and that both of these methods could achieve certain results. You must not misunderstand this. God is almighty, but He also has a practical side, and people cannot see this. People see God as very supernatural, and they cannot fathom Him. So they develop notions and all kinds of unrealistic ideas about Him. Very few people see that God's words and work are the truth, that they are practical, that they are the most realistic things, and that they can be touched and seen by man. If people really have caliber and the comprehension ability, after experiencing several years of God's work, they should be able to see that all of the words God expresses are the truth realities, that there are truths and principles in all of the work and the things that He does, and that everything He does has great significance. Whatever God does has meaning, is necessary, and can achieve the best results. It all has a definite purpose, plan, and significance. Do you think that God's work is done based on thoughtlessly spoken words? He has an almighty side, but He also has a practical side. Your knowledge is one-sided. There are errors in your understanding of God's almighty side, to say nothing of your understanding of His practical side, where your errors are much greater. In the 3 stages of God's work, the first stage is done by the Spirit, while the last 2 stages are done by the Incarnation, and each stage of His work is very essential. Take the crucifixion, for example. If the Spirit was crucified on the cross, it would have no meaning, because people cannot see or touch the Spirit, and the Spirit cannot feel anything or suffer pain. Consequently, this crucifixion would have no meaning. The stage which takes place in the last days is that of conquering people, which is work that the flesh can do. The Incarnation cannot be replaced by the Spirit when it comes to this work, and the work done by the Spirit cannot be done by the flesh. When God chooses the flesh or the Spirit to do any stage of His work, this is an absolutely necessary choice, and it is all done in order to attain the best results and to achieve the aims of His management plan. God has an almighty side and a practical side. He works in a practical way in every stage of His work. People imagine that God doesn't talk or think, and that He does whatever He wants to do, but this is not the case. He has wisdom. He has all that He is, and this is His essence. When He works, He needs to reveal and express His disposition, His essence, His wisdom, and all that He has and is, so that people can understand, come to know, and attain these things. He does not work based on thin air, and much less does He work based on people's imaginings. He acts according to the needs of the work, and according to the results which need to be achieved. He speaks in a practical way. He works and suffers day by day, and when He suffers, He feels pain. It is not as if the Spirit is present during the time when the incarnation works and speaks, and that the Spirit goes away when the incarnation does not work and speak. If this were the case, then he would not have suffered, and this would not have been an incarnation. People can't see God's practical side, and so people do not know God well, and their understanding of Him is only skin deep. People say that God is practical and normal, or that God is almighty and all-powerful. All of these words are ones that they have learned from others, because they don't have true knowledge or real experience. When it comes to the incarnation, why is there such an emphasis on the essence of the incarnation? Why not the Spirit? The focus is on the work of the flesh. The work of the Spirit is to assist and help, and this achieves the results of the work of the flesh. In each phase, people can come to know a little about God, but they are unable to break through or attain it when they want to know a little more about Him. When God says a little, people understand a little, but their knowledge of Him is still not very clear, and they can't easily grasp the essential part of it. If you think that the Spirit can do whatever the flesh can do, and that the Spirit can take the place of the flesh, then you will never know the significance of the flesh, the work of the flesh, and what the incarnation is.